Welcome. You're listening to This Leader, the podcast. If you lead people and are seeking the transformational, high-impact secrets that will lead to greater joy and fulfillment in your work, will optimize your team performance, and will help you create a happy, highly productive workplace, then you are this leader and you're in the right place. I'm your host, Claire Laughlin, and each week my guests and I will explore the mindsets, techniques, and actionable strategies that will help you build the career, team, and organization of your dreams. Because I believe no one should have to suffer in a dysfunctional workplace. Let's get started. Hi there. Welcome to This Leader. You know what happened to me last week? I was working with one of my clients, and I never share a client's confidential experiences, so we'll just call her Sarah for now. And she said something that really stuck with me. She said, Claire, my team is doing all the right things. They're meeting their goals, they're showing up to meetings, they're getting the work done, but something is missing. There's just no energy there. Everything just feels flat. And when she said it, I knew exactly what she meant. It's this feeling that while things look okay on the surface, underneath there's this disconnection and kind of isolation almost and low-grade apathy. Do any of you feel that? It's this sense that we're all going through the motions, but not really feeling energized by our work or connected to each other. And I really sense that this has been especially exaggerated since the pandemic, and that our return to work, we came back, but we didn't really reset and reestablish a new way of working that's really working for us. In fact, I made up the word a while back, pandemnesia, because I wanted to describe this condition of having forgotten what life was like prior to the pandemic. So let me explain. Every week, as I spend time with leaders and teams from lots of different organizations, I recognize work patterns and trends that I believe are a direct result of adaptations we made during the pandemic. Things have fundamentally shifted. We all adapted to a sudden, drastic paradigm shift, and we learned to work remotely, which led to greater flexibility and autonomy, and in many cases, better work-life integration, as well as greater productivity, I'll say. These are all wonderful outcomes. But remote work and the hybrid workplace structure that has taken hold as a result also has its costs. So, for example, we now have a lot more meetings, and they're back-to-back Teams and Zoom, often without a minute to spare, but less quality collaboration, right? We're not collaborating like we used to. We're in meetings, but we're not collaborating. We have a lot more communication. We have Teams, email, Slack, instant messaging, text messages, the occasional phone call, but less real connection with our team members. We have more work, like a quantity of work, because we're in a phase of managing continuous change with less focus on what's most impactful and what will make the biggest difference. And we have more choices about where to live, work, and play, but I feel like there's less loyalty between employer and employee. Of course, these are not universally true, but my experience in multiple organizations that tells me that conversations are different now. Like, I hear a lot more individuals talking about what's in it for me and less about how can I really add value. And I hear more from leaders about, hey, where's the accountability? And less about how can we inspire, right? And I hear a lot more from teams about, is the work getting done? And less about, let's rally around the goal. And all of this tells me that we need an energy reset. We don't need to throw out the positive changes we've made. Like, I'm not saying everybody should come back to work in the office full time by all means, right? We've come too far for that. But I really believe that many of us could do better in terms of energy, focus, and connection. So, what if we reclaimed our shared values and revived the connectedness between people, right? What if we refocused on our real purpose and inspired energy around our goals instead of chasing deadlines? What if we reset and re energized? That's my question for today. I want to share two powerful strategies that can help you do exactly that: reset and re energize your team. And these are real, meaningful ways to help your people feel connected, engaged, and energized again. They're small shifts with big impact. But here's the thing: you're going to need to be disciplined about these strategies. These are not one and done approaches. These are small new habits that can really transform a team. So let's start with strategy number one. I want you to celebrate progress, not perfection, right? Or celebrate progress, not just outcomes. This first strategy is about shifting from that mindset of like, is the work getting done, to a mindset of, hey, let's rally around the goal. Okay. And this strategy is backed by solid research, and I know it'll just make good sense to you. So, the book, The Progress Principle by Teresa Amabile of Harvard, is based on a comprehensive study where she and her team analyzed nearly 12,000 diary entries from 238 employees across 7 companies. It was a really deep dive into these diary entries while they were tracking these employees. It's a great book, by the way, if you haven't read it. Her key finding was quite groundbreaking, really. Like, of all the things that can boost people's emotions and motivation and perceptions during a workday, the single most important factor is making progress in meaningful work, even small progress. And she calls this the progress principle. And she found that even small wins can boost what she calls inner work life, which is the mix of emotions and motivations and perceptions that people experience as they go through their workday. And small losses or setbacks can have a really disproportionately negative effect on inner work life. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. And the perception of progress is almost as important as actual progress. And finally, leaders often underestimate the importance of progress and focus instead on incentives and recognition and long term outcomes, right? So let me just say a little bit more about this small losses or setbacks, because a lot of times when we do not plan our work appropriately, we have to pause the work or experience losses and setbacks because we get overwhelmed. And this is just a great case for putting in a little more planning time up front to ensure that you're getting the right outcomes and that you actually have time to make the wins. So her research showed that when people feel that they're making progress in meaningful work, their creativity increases, their productivity improves, their engagement goes up, and they're more likely to stay with their organization. I've experienced that directly when my team and I started to do just weekly wins. My better half, Marissa, she sends me progress reports, and they are so motivating. She's generating, hey, Claire, here's the wins for the week. And it's so great. I love that she does that. It's really motivating. A particularly interesting finding of all this work is that progress doesn't need to be momentous, like small incremental steps forward. And what Amabile calls small wins, we've all heard that term, can have a surprisingly strong positive effect on people's inner work life. So this is what we need to tap into as leaders. And doing it really isn't as complicated as you might think. So I'm going to talk about two approaches. The first is simple. Start implementing what I call like progress check-ins with teams. Pick a day of the week, any day of the week, like Thursday maybe. And then every Thursday, ask team members to share one small step forward they've taken. This doesn't have to be huge. Maybe they just finally figured out an Excel formula, or they had a breakthrough with a difficult, you know, team member or cross-functional coworker, right? Or they found a better way to organize their files. Doesn't have to be anything huge, but what are you winning? What's the win? And it's amazing as how the simple practice can really change the energy in a team, because people start suddenly paying attention to, noticing, and celebrating progress, both their own and others. And they feel more motivated because they can see that they're moving forward, even on tough days. So that might be an easy one. But the next one is more involved, but it pays off in many, many ways. And it's to take the time to plan your work, like I mentioned above. And this means like planning ahead with milestones and deliverables weekly or monthly. This makes progress a lot more possible because each week you know what kind of win you should be working toward, and it's very meaningful and connected to your most important outcomes. And then you'll create these sort of weekly bookend huddles, like on Mondays and Fridays. And on Mondays, ask everyone what they're working toward this week and what their deliverables or milestones should be. You can even track this on a shared sort of project document, and you can all see the wins visually if you're working together in a room or even virtually. So this makes the work very tangible, and it gives us a sense of urgency and focus. And you should also use this first meeting of the week to identify any barriers to success and let team members talk about ways they can help each other. Then at the end of the week, you simply come together to celebrate what's been done, right? Just like I mentioned, this is a great way to celebrate the small wins, to track again and be like, okay, we did it, right? We did it. We met our deliverables, we met our milestones. And that gives us that sense of progress that fuels our energy and drive. People end the week feeling complete. What a win that is. Okay, let's move on to strategy number 2, which I like to call connect before content, even in a virtual world. So remember that Monday huddle I just mentioned? Well, it can be so much more than a progress check-in. This really takes us to our second strategy, which is all about creating those meaningful connection points that we've lost in this sort of more meetings, less collaboration type of world. And this one, fair warning, is particularly challenging in our remote and hybrid workplaces because we've lost so much of those spontaneous hallway conversations and quick drop bys and informal sort of lunch gatherings or water cooler gatherings that used to build team connections. We can't rely on physical proximity as much especially if you're working remotely or even in a hybrid. And that physical proximity used to create connection. We have to be intentional about this. So, how do we create those informal, meaningful connections in this virtual world? Again, two approaches. So, that's Monday huddle we talked about. First and foremost, start that Monday huddle with a connection question. Like before diving into the work and the work updates and deliverables we talked about earlier, just connect. Pose a quick question that helps people connect on a really human level. Something like, right, what's something that brought you joy this weekend, or something you're looking forward to this week, or a challenge you recently overcame. So I recommend that if you're doing this virtually, everyone turn on their cameras and take a moment to really connect. This helps us break that invisible barrier that crops up in these virtual meetings, and it leads to greater levels of engagement overall. I always say, like, get people's voice in the room as fast as possible. Now, if you feel uncomfortable about asking people to turn on their cameras, or your folks refuse to turn on their cameras, then we need to have another conversation. That might be a trust issue, okay? But if you do have that situation, call on people. Go around the screen and call every name, at least hear every voice. Or at a minimum, use the chat function. Ask people to type their answers in the chat first, and then invite a few people to elaborate. And this can be really beneficial because, well, it could save time, right? Everyone participates simultaneously, so you don't lose time to awkward silences. And it can give quieter team members, a little bit of comfort when they're contributing. It also, by the way, as a leader, it can create a written record for you of shared experiences and interests, which can be really helpful down the line. Keep it light, keep it brief, but make it consistent. And if you're not doing this already, you'll be amazed at how this tiny investment, just a couple of minutes of connection, can change the energy of your virtual meetings and your team. Okay, now here's a more involved approach, but one that can really transform your team culture. You can create skills spotlight moments. And here's how it works. Like maybe once a month or so, ask a team member to spend, 5 to 30 minutes teaching the team something that they're good at. It can be anything from how to use a new productivity tool or an app or a browser extension or some AI tool. It could be a technique for managing time or energy or focus. It could be a tip for staying organized. How do you do it, right? Or a way to make presentations more engaging. Even something from their personal life, like photography or gardening or cooking. And this does a lot of powerful things. Like it positions each team member as having valuable expertise to share,
What a great feeling and a form of recognition, by the way. It helps people see each other as really whole human beings, not just faces and video boxes. If your team has all joined remotely, I know a lot of teams that actually have never met in person. This can really add a lot of depth. And it creates a natural sort of mentoring relationship type thing between people as people discover some shared interests. It builds psychological safety because everyone now gets a turn to be the expert. And it gives people a reason to reach out to each other between meetings. I know I've done this even as the facilitator of a meeting. When I hear someone sharing, they're like, they tell about gardening, and I think, oh, I want to follow up with that person afterwards. So it's really important. Just the other day, I joined a team for an afternoon session. They had been together in the morning, and one of their peers had done a training session on communication. It was a sales team. And it was so cool to feel the connection aftermath of this training that they had done because people were referencing it all afternoon and asking questions of the presenter. And I could tell that it was really special because it was delivered by a peer. So I've seen how this strategy can really transform a team. In fact, one team I'm working with started by just sharing productivity tips, but that has evolved into this rich knowledge sharing about anything they believe can improve their ways of working. It's really great. And it helps them rely on each other for advice in all kinds of areas. So you can imagine the boost that they get from that. So just remember that in our world of back to back virtual meetings, we don't need more time in meetings. We need more meaning in our meetings, right? We need more meaning in our meetings. These small but intentional moments of connection can make a big difference, whether we're in the same room or connecting across time zones. It's really important. And I know a lot of people are already doing this, but if you're not, or if you're only doing it now and then, or if you think my team doesn't need this, just look around the room and see if anyone in particular is feeling disconnected and then restart. A lot of times we add people to our teams and we forget that now we've got one person who's less connected than the others. Now, I want to acknowledge something important here. I know that you might already be feeling overwhelmed with deadlines and deliverables and daily fires to put out. And the idea of adding more to your plate can feel impossible. Like, you might be thinking, Claire, this sounds great, but I barely take breaks and I don't even have time to eat lunch most days, right? And I get it. I really, really do. And let me be honest. Making these small changes, even though they're small, isn't always easy. You could face some resistance from your team members who are very comfortable not turning on their camera, not speaking up, right? They just want things to stay the way they are. And their perspective is, I'm getting my work done. I don't need to connect with each other, right? So this is really important because sometimes people get this perception that spending time on connection and celebration takes away from real work. But here's what I've seen happen time and again, especially with the leaders that really commit to this. First, you could start getting your time back, right? When your team feels more connected and energized, they start solving problems with each other and on their own. They reach out for each other, to each other for help instead of always coming to you. And some of those daily fires, well, they start preventing those fires before they even spark. Second, and this is really important, you find yourself enjoying your role more and other people enjoy their work more as well. Instead of feeling like you're constantly pushing a boulder uphill, you start experiencing those moments of joy that made you want to be a leader in the first place. Like seeing your people grow and watching them succeed and feeling a sense of pride in what you're building together. And finally, and this part really lights me up, you start creating the kind of workplace that you want. One where people genuinely want to be there and where creativity flows and where challenges are met with enthusiasm rather than dread. So here's what I want you to consider. Which of these strategies resonates most with where your team is right now? Could you start with just one small step this week? Right? Start a huddle or do a moments of connection or something. And remember, re-energizing your team doesn't have to be about grand gestures or complete overhauls. It's often about consistent, intentional actions that show your people they matter. It's about creating spaces where real connection can happen and where progress, even small progress and small wins, are celebrated. So, that's it for today. I hope this episode helped you. If it helped you, please share it with another leader who might benefit from it. And don't forget to visit my website for resources on all kinds of things from team engagement to connection and more. Thank you so much for listening. And until next week, go lead the way.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode. To learn more about my services and for lots of free resources and additional tools to enrich your journey, visit my website and subscribe to my newsletter at clairelaughlin.com. If you have a question about leadership, teams, or organizational culture you'd like me to address on the podcast, please reach out to me at support@clairelaughlin.com and connect with me on social channels at Claire Laughlin Consulting. Until next time, lead the way.